Hello everyone, I'm Rishi Persad and welcome once again to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by Odds Checker that takes a 360-degree view of the sport we all love. As usual, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Sam Turner, who has been at the Dublin Racing Festival. So Sam, how are you? How are you feeling?
Rehydrating, Rishi. I tried a bit of rehydration over the weekend. It didn't work quite as well as I thought it might do, but I think the clear liquid is probably better than the black stuff for that. But yeah, I had a great weekend over there, some fabulous racing, some brilliant atmosphere, and just enjoyed it.
I was going to ask about the atmosphere because the feeling, especially listening to what some of the competitors were saying, suggested that the racing really brought out the best in the crowd.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously there was a few short price favourites won over the weekend. You know, people will attack those races in different ways, won't they? They'll look to oppose or they'll look to be with them. But I think there was just a genuine enthusiasm for having big crowds back on an Irish racecourse and really watching some quality action on the turf. I just thought there was some exceptional performances. As we thought doing last week's pod going into this week, we were going to see some superstars anointed, some reputations enhanced, and there weren't too many reputations that got damaged over the weekend, really. All the horses we thought were going to be good and show it on the track pretty much delivered. So it was, great weekend all round, really. We learned plenty, I think.
I was a little bit jealous watching from afar, but thanks for the moment, Sam. Obviously, we'll be talking more about that in just a moment. But before we get into the action, I'd like to point you in the direction of Odds Checker's Cheltenham Super Service. Odds Checker are doing the hard yards for you this year on the lead up to the festival. That means getting the news that matters, exclusive insight from experts like our very own Andy Holding, and the latest bookie offers as they're released all to your inbox. All you need is an email address, and you can find the link to sign up in the YouTube description below or wherever you're listening to this podcast. As you heard from Sam, it was, of course, the Dublin Racing Festival this weekend. And with that in mind, we'll start the show as we do every week with Racing Recap.
On the run of the final fence in the Ladbrokes Dublin Chase at Chacun Pour Soi, opening up a sizable lead at the final fence at Chacun Pour Soi over the last and clear from Dunvegan and Cap. Conflated with Menendo trying to close as they come to the final fence. It's Conflated over from Menendo, 5 lengths behind but coming. There's a new name on the Paddy Pot Irish Gold Cup. Conflated has won it in some style. There's no holding a candle to Facile Vega here. Has absolutely accelerated away from Sandor Clegane. Coming to the final flight, it's Honeysuckle and Rachel Blackmore with a 6 to 7 length advantage. Chased safely over from Zanny here and Echoes and Rain as the crowd rises to salute a champion.
Before we get into our edition of Racing Recap this week, I'm delighted to say that we are joined by racing tipster and all-round Irish racing expert, Johnny Ward. Johnny, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for taking the time. How are you, and how much did you enjoy those last 2 days?
I'm very well, lads. Great to be on. As I said to you before the show, I was just in Dublin on the bus this morning. I saw Dave Yates wandering the streets, so great to see British journalists back. Welsh rugby fans in Dublin on Friday night was fantastic. Great to see racegoers back. It was return to normality. I think Rachel Blackmore touched on as well, Rishi, like that 2 years of really, few crowds or no crowds. She was kind of experiencing a spine-tingling moment, and I think racegoers did in general. It was just great to see crowds back at Leopardstown.
Right, well, let's get straight into it. It was great to see so many people there, and they had so much to enjoy over the 2 days. So let's start. Sam, first of all, what would your highlight of the weekend be?
Well, there was obviously one or two quite emotional performances and victories. Obviously, Honeysuckle, record breaking, etc. But I think purely from a sort of an analyst and a very boring number cruncher point of view, it would be Vauban. I thought he did plenty wrong in that Triumph Hurdle trial at the Spring Juvenile, often the best trial for the Triumph Hurdle. Stuck out wide, a little bit keen, didn't jump with assured quality all the way around, but put up a really, really good performance on the figures. And those of us who have a good look at the data were very impressed with Vauban.
I thought he did a lot wrong. Yeah, he won in really impressive style. Johnny, do you agree? Vauban, one of the stars of the show. Did you have another horse that stood out above everything else?
Yeah, Sam says he was impressive because he did quite a bit wrong considering his inexperience. And I tipped Fieldor quite strongly, to be honest. I thought it would take a hell of a performance to beat him. And he was absolutely brushed aside by a horse who did plenty wrong in the race. But Facile Vega, for me, on so many levels, Rishi, just the pedigree of this horse. Maybe we'll talk later on about how Quavega might be as a broodmare, because a lot of these really good race mares don't produce. But you match her with Walk in the Park and you get the best on paper. And that's what he could be. Will he be an absolute good for the Cheltenham bumper? Maybe he will be, but he was, for me, probably the most visually awesome performance of what was a hell of a weekend in terms of awesome performances.
Yeah, that was fully endorsed by a lot of experts who watched the race, saying that they haven't seen many bumper performances quite of that ilk in recent times. But let's go back to Honeysuckle, focus a bit more on her and what you both made of her performance. I thought it was pretty impressive, particularly when she quickened up and she put distance between herself and Zanahiyr and ran away from him at that point. One or two people I've seen, especially on social media, are crabbing her a little bit, saying she didn't jump that well. She was hanging a little bit to her left and a little bit disappointed overall with the fact that she's now 14 from 14. I liked what I saw. Sam, what about you?
I think we like to do it in sport, don't we? Whether it be Liverpool winning all the league titles of the 80s, Manchester United in the Ferguson era, Steve Davis winning countless tournaments, or Stephen Hendrick. We look to knock the winners, don't we? And we're looking to pick holes in her. She's got the perfect record, obviously, and equal Bueller over the weekend. I think there are one or two areas and facets of her performance that you could smarten up a little bit. I think we take it in context as well with how the Henry de Bromhead horses are running at the moment. They're not flash. Let's be honest. The figures aren't great for him. They haven't been for 2 or 3 months really. So I think the fact that she still managed to win and horses like Cursor Bleem have managed to win. I know they've been very short prices, but at least they have to manage to win by a degree of authority. I think Rachel's well alive to her hurdling, not deficiencies, but just foibles that, she's very keen and eager to commit Honeysuckle from an early point so as she doesn't get embroiled in a battle. I think we saw it a little bit with Conflated in the Irish Gold Cup, that Davy Russell felt the same. He wanted to commit, get clear, get some clear water, and then hold on if necessary. And Honeysuckle's a little bit like that, very strong stayer at 2. It's what she does in between the hurdles that seems to win her the races, not the slickness of her jumping. So I think, you'd probably give her a 7.5, 8 out of 10 for the hurdling. But, for her dominance in between the hurdles, I mean, she's just absolutely, just different class, isn't she, to everything that's in and around her at the moment. We're not in a great era, I don't think, of champion hurdle aspirants. You only got to look at the market on Oddschecker for that. So I think she's, she's best of not a bad bunch, but a modest bunch, let's say.
Johnny, could you pick holes in her performance?
It was fine, Rishi. She beat Zanahiyr, who practically went at the first, what was it, by 6.5 lengths. In terms of her best performances, it was just fine. I wonder mentally what races are like for her now, because she's never lost, so she just expects to win. And I imagine if she's idling at her hurdles at times, she does hang left at times. Sam talked about Henry de Bromhead's form. He was 23% in October. He's been 8% in November, December. He had 7 horses go to Britain in that time, all who basically finished third or worse, a lot of whom disappointed. So I think that's why, especially on the exchanges, you can get such a price on the off, because literally we're backing her to run her race. She's never been beaten. She's miles ahead of these, and you can get nearly 1 to 4, which totally reflected for me doubts about the stable form. Again, some very disappointed de Bromhead runners this weekend. She was able to defy that. I'd agree with Sam. I'd like to see more depth to this division, because Zanahiyr is nowhere near a top-class hurdler, let's be honest, and he was able to hold off a totally flattering Echoes in Rain and come in second. But I do love what she's doing for the sport. I do love what she and Rachel Blackmore are doing with the sport. And I do like the fact that she's unbeaten. And if I did own her, I'd be kind of almost, I'd be frightened of her ever losing at this stage, because I think to be unbeaten at this level is really, really rare. And it'd be something I'd like to protect. But I'd still be just hoping that Henry's horses are better on the figures going into March.
We look at the market for the race on Oddschecker. She's 8 to 13. Appreciate it. 8 to 1 Sharjah, 9 to 1, and then double figures the rest. The gap between her and her contemporaries is enormous. So would I be right in saying to you both that, without using the word foregone or the words foregone conclusion, but the champion hurdle is as close to a foregone conclusion as we can possibly come? Am I right, Sam?
Well, without using those words, Richie, which you just used, yeah. it's never a fault. I mean, we're yet to see Appreciate It. We don't know what we're going to get from him. There was sort of little or no word about why he missed the race at the weekend, but that was just taken as granted that it wasn't turned up. There seemed to be no questions asked, which I find strange, because if it was over in this country and it was, say, Nicky Henderson, he'd be getting it both barrels from everybody on Twitter and whatever. But anyway, that's another matter. Sharjah. Epatante is on the way back, but is she really ever going to reach that level again? You're asking her to maintain her resurgence, and even then, is she anywhere close to Honeysuckle? So probably is a foregone conclusion, Rishi, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, if we saw Appreciated, I think Ruby Walsh inferred that he wasn't entirely appreciating it rather at home, and Willie Mullins just wasn't entirely happy with him. So he's the only flying the ointment. The rest are nowhere near good enough to beat Rishi. And I looked at the Gold Cup odds. I was a bit surprised to see Galopin as short as he is, in terms of what his background. But the fact that she's 8-13, and I wouldn't be laying her at that.
No, I would agree. And as you say, there's more to her than just being favoured for the champion, never being a good racehorse. There's a bit more to her personality, her relationship with Rachel Blackmore. I'm saying that, in terms of sporting pairs, it's as good as it gets at the moment. Let's talk about the champion chase picture after the third success in the Dublin chase for Chacun Pour Soi in a row. Johnny, is this the real Chacun Pour Soi? But is this only the real Chacun Pour Soi that we will see in Ireland, and maybe we won't see in the UK?
Yeah, I was kind of knocking that idea after the race, Rishi, because I think, you can look at the two English visits in isolation. Remember how late he was scratched from another. He was reportedly lame, and he was quite sore reportedly for 2 or 3 days after the Tingle Creek. For me, they just got the tactics wrong. I know I'm repeating what other people are saying, but I think they got the tactics wrong at Cheltenham. I'd be more than happy to think he'll be able to go to Cheltenham and run his race. And I think it's a tough call for Paul Townend if the two of them turn up here. Willie Mullins has never won the race, so you're thinking he probably will run both of them. He'll probably not go Ryanair with Honor Gamine or Chacun Pour Soi. I think Honor Gamine would be fine in the Ryanair, not so much Chacun Pour Soi, but his jumping for me was spectacular yesterday. I thought he was perfect from start to finish. He didn't get a soft lead, and for a horse that has been doubted about how he finishes his races, over 2 miles won on softish ground, he finished very strongly. He didn't beat an awful lot, some kind of doubtful characters in behind, but for me he was as good as ever yesterday. I'd love to see him go to Cheltenham and give his performance. I don't think he'll beat Shishkin, but I could definitely see him finishing second.
I said yesterday when I was working on ITV Racing, I did say, Sam, that I think some people are a little bit harsh on this horse because he did have the best part of 3 years nearly off the track. Yet he's back and turning in these amazing performances, occasionally running below his best for whatever reason. I think we ought to cut him a bit of slack. He's still a magnificent racehorse.
Yeah, I think so. And he's only beaten a length and a half in the champion chase, wasn't he? I mean, I know he was favourite, and it was a bit of an odd race, etc., like 12 months ago, but he got really beaten around the head with that defeat, and I thought it was a bit harsh, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I know he hasn't brought his A game yet. Sort of got a little bit of a word over the weekend that I think Willie Mullins might try something a little bit different with him this year and leave a little bit more on him going into the festival than he has done, instead of getting him sort of race fit and hard. He obviously doesn't travel very well. They are worried about that, and whether he's a little bit of a nervous flyer, like one or two of my compatriots over the weekend. I think if he leaves him probably just a gallop short and maybe gets over a little bit earlier. I don't know if those are going to be the tactics employed, but just little birdie was telling me that over the weekend, that they might just try something different with him. And it makes sense. I mean, you obviously can't keep repeating the same mistakes and hoping for a different outcome. But I haven't got a problem with him over the hill either. I don't see that angle at all. I just think it's probably his well-being and just his constitution when he gets to the race.
Can I get your views on the ride Grenadine got, actually, Sam? It was interesting. I know Nichols, both his horses were disappointing. He completely bombed. Was it a case of the ground, or was it just an off day?
No, I saw Bryony come in for a little bit of criticism for where she raced on the track. She walked the track. I think her and Harry Darren walked the track. They were happy with the inside rail. The feeling was, I mean, obviously the Nichols horses have not been great for the last 7 to 10 days. I mean, that's a given, really. They've been bang out of Nick Bard, Dolos winning. But I think the key was to get on the inside rail and just try and hang his head over the rail a little bit. He can be keen, and if he'd have gone out wide with perhaps the rest of the field, there was a feeling that he would have just pulled himself into the ground after a mile and a half anyway, and he'd have had nothing left. So that was the best chance they felt of getting him to settle. Just get him anchored against that rail around the inside, and just hopefully he'd drop his head and run his race. But as we've seen with a lot of the Nichols horses, they just check out so early at the moment for whatever reason, whether it's post-flu jab or whether there's something else, another low-grade thing. You know, the bloods are all right. The bloods are fine. And that's why they're still running them. But there must just be something on them because they're not finishing the races.
Okay, gentlemen, tell me, Champion Chase, Shishkin 8-11, odds checker, Energumen 100-30, Chacun Pour Soi 13-2. Your selection, what would it be, Johnny?
Shishkin, I just think he's miles better going left-handed, and if he's anyway close at the last, he just wins.
Sam?
Ditto.
Easy as that. All right, let's talk about the Irish Gold Cup now. Johnny, were you one of the elite band of tipsters that put up Conflated in the lead up to the Irish Gold Cup? Is that right?
I was, and I bet you we'll all say the same thing. It's not that we loved the horse that much, it was that we were so suspicious of everything else in the race, pretty much.
Why? I mean, but what was it about Conflated and the field, as you say, suspicious of the others,
well,
that you were a punt?
You go through half the field. Asturian Forlorn was sent off favourite. A horse with so many negatives. He hadn't completed the last twice. He's going left-handed. Doesn't necessarily even stay 3 miles. Then you look at, Manila Indo coming back, who had so much to prove. Kemboy, who's limited, was fair enough. I didn't think Frodon was necessarily going to run his race. Janadil probably doesn't stay. There were so many negatives. He was going into the race in good nick. He was unexposed at 3 miles. I thought Delta work. I was a bit like Enda Bulger looking at the hats. I was like, which hat are we here? Because he was wearing the first hat of the Jigenstown colours, which was maybe a nod to the fact that they did like his chance. But in fairness, if you watch his performance, it was practically flawless, Rishi. I thought Davy Russell was beautiful on him. He got him into a lovely, lovely rhythm. And bloody hell, he may have a chance of winning the Gold Cup, this fella. And imagine if you're on him in the Kerry National at 4s or 5s or 6s and you didn't even get to the third or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, Gordon Elliott did say that he considered running him in a handicap at this at the Dublin Racing Festival, not the Gold Cup. But Sam, obviously, I know you were there. What was the reaction to
minimal, apart from about 50 punters who came up to me and said that they backed him all rates down from 50s, 43s, 30s, 22s. I mean, honestly, the amount of people that came up to me and said they backed Conflated, Johnny. I know
it was like it was the horse LeBake when he won. I've never seen many people back a horse who was 50-1 or whatever. Like, unbelievable.
Well, considering half the racetrack was on it, it was a very, very quiet. I mean, like me delivering a gag at the best man speech. It was silent, mate. Honestly,
LeBake, Torquato Tasso, and Conflated didn't go off favourite. Everyone's like those three.
I know. An inspired pick, though. And obviously, Johnny was one of the main ringleaders. I think Paul Keeley and Tom Segal. So hats off to you guys for finding that one.
You look at the race, though. I mean, you just look at the form. For me, Asturian Forlorn to go off favourite. He was ridden wide as well, which basically meant he was forfeiting even more ground. Obviously, Frodon didn't run his race. Manila Indo, I wouldn't be getting too excited about that run, to be honest. I thought it was okay. I'd still have Galvin ahead of him in terms of the pecking order. And Jack Hindy spoke about this yesterday at the track. He's like, his reliability will take him to maybe a level that you can rely on at Cheltenham, whereas this horse has been quirky. So I'd still have doubts about what he achieved.
I'm going to just disagree slightly. I thought it was a really encouraging run from Manila Indo. I didn't think Robbie Power was
Gold Cup trial.
I didn't think he gave him the full Gold Cup treatment ride. Jockey in a Grade 1. I think it was just the sort of ride that you would want a horse to bring it forward for the Gold Cup. So that was what I thought the context of Manila Indo's performance is, and obviously going back to Cheltenham would be massive.
Isn't it great to have enough money as an owner where you can treat a race like this as a trial for something else?
Well, yes, but also the fact he is a Gold Cup winner, so the money's in the bank.
He is indeed.
Just a quick question for you, Johnny. Do you think he's actually a better horse without Rachel Blackmore riding him?
I don't know. I mean, I know that I was a bit surprised they made that decision so far out. I imagine Robbie's going to ride him at Cheltenham now. I'd just be worried that if he did kind of flop at Leopardstown, that's 3 runs where you're thinking, well, what's going on with the horse here? But I think he will be in top shape at Cheltenham, and I'd still be I'd be kind of eager to to think that he'd run a very big race. And like, it's hard to believe Galvin is 3 points shorter than him in the betting at the moment. I don't necessarily think it's a racial thing, to be honest. I think he's fairly straightforward. He will come back at Cheltenham to the performance. I think something similar to what he produced last year, if the De Bromhead horses are in form, which I still think is a bit of a concern.
Definitely.
Gold Cup betting at the moment. Applutard 7-2 favourite. Conflated as big as 12-1. This is all on Odds Checker. If you had to choose one horse for the Gold Cup now, Johnny, what would it be?
It'd be Galvin, Rishi, but it's a stupid proviso here. I did think I was a little bit surprised he'd shorten as much. I think he's rock solid and will run well. Protectorate, I think, will run well also.
All right, and Sam?
Yeah, Galvin 9-2 with 365. That appeals. Non-runner no bet, I think, as well. So I think you covered there. You've got a good horse with plenty of Cheltenham experience behind him, who comes good in the spring. So I think he's a big player. Yeah,
fair enough. Last week, of course, when we did the Gold Cup as the festival focus race, I went for 2, Manila Indo and Album Photo, and I'm pleased with my hand at the moment. Let's talk about a race that we've already touched on, and that is Facile Vega in the bumper on Saturday. Johnny, I'll start with you here because you've already mentioned the pedigree, and obviously he's a son of Quevega. That adds to the whole romance of the story enormously, doesn't it?
It's massively adds to romance. And I was just talking to a guy within racing today, and he was saying that he thinks that Quevega's kind of light touch career may have actually helped her as a broodmare here because she's not bottomed out. And there's an old theory in racing that these great broodmares, these great race mares don't necessarily do it at stud because they've kind of given everything. And you look at the likes of Opera Hat, Solarina, really disappointing at stud compared to, their exploits at the track. Whereas Quevega, obviously, whether you like it or not, she basically showed up at Cheltenham and maybe one other run. But walking the park, obviously subsequent to Duvan and Min, he was shuttled over and got all these really good mares and unbelievable success we're seeing already. And this horse just seems to have everything. He does bend his knee a little bit. I was just looking at his his action would suggest that he will like a bit of soft ground. His time at Christmas was actually quicker on officially soft ground than it was on yielding at the weekend, but I wouldn't read too much into that. You'd 7 previous winners in the race. Watch the way he went by the Nolan runner as if he weren't there. I think between American Mike, we've 2 absolute superstars in the making here, and I'd be loath to say he's a good thing at Cheltenham because American Mike's reputation is so big and he's done nothing wrong at all that I do wonder, but I would be absolutely astonished if anything else won the champion bumper. And I just love how hard he was to pull up as well, Rishi, and just that there was something awesome about the visual evidence where they had that camera on him just going by the Nolan runner as if he weren't there for an and a half down.
That's what I loved about watching that race, Sam, the way he cruised into contention, hardly having to do seemingly much work. And then when asked, he quickened away very, very impressively. The manner of everything he does suggests there's more to come. And I love the quote from Willie Mullins after the race where he said, I thought he was good, but he's even better than I originally thought. And it just suggests to me that this horse is going to be very exciting to follow, not just this year and hopefully for seasons ahead. But do you agree with Johnny that the winner's likely to come out of the top 2 in the market?
Yeah, although Patrick Mullins keeps giving a little nod and a wink to Redemption Day, doesn't he? He doesn't like to leave that out of any conversation when they're talking about the bumper horses. So I just give a little shifty eye on him. Yeah, and apparently Willie's got probably the half brother or the full brother to this lad at home. He hasn't actually seen him work yet, but the quote was, "The lads tell me he goes a bit." So fair play. They just keep finding these horses off the production line, don't they? But I'm tremendously impressed with him. I think Ted Walsh coined him as the best bumper horse he's seen in 25 years.
Well,
Ted's been around the block a bit, hasn't he?
I was going to say he's certainly seen a few bumpers in his time. Talking about the Willie Mullins conveyor belt of success, we'll spin through a few of the other races that we saw. And Vauban, who you've both touched on as being ultra impressive. And I think, as Johnny was saying earlier in the show, did a lot of things wrong, yet he won in such style. And it was a significant step up from what he did first time behind Pied Piper. Sam, what did you make of it?
Yeah, both of those horses have stepped up significantly, and now they dominate the market, don't they, on Odds Checker? So the overall time was exceptional for a juvenile hurdler. The sectional time as well, if you break it down, compared really, really well with Facile Vega, with Good Time Johnny and obviously Manella Kakuna as well, was the best on the card. I just think he's a real superstar in the making, and I don't think he'd mind whatever the ground is, bit of cut in the ground, whatever, absolutely fine given his form in France in a former life. And they're talking about the Melbourne Cup as well, so there's some ambitious races being thrown around after the victory on Saturday. But I just love the way he moved through that race. And I think you can just put him anywhere in a race as well. I think he can get more professional at his hurdles, but I think the engine's there. And I think that's the most important thing at the moment.
The engine is definitely there. And Johnny, apart from everything else, we also got a chance or a first glimpse of Richie's lovely locks that he's proudly boasting as well over the weekend, which we saw again after Chacun Pour Soi won. But amazingly, Willie Mullins, they have another top-class young hurdler, which is excellent. I love Vauban. I think that he might be the real deal. What do you think?
It's not that amazing, though, because he's so much money. This is the thing. All these owners in Ireland have so much money now. They buy the horses before they've even won a point practically. And that's why all these horses end up winning bumpers in a hat canter for these top yards. I mean, the stats are 18 out of 24 of the first 3 in the 8 grade 1s were trained by Willie or Gordon. So that's 3/4 of the first 3 in the 6 races, in the 8 races, the grade 1s were trained by Willie or Gordon. And that's where we're at the moment. Henry, I think, had 3 as well. So it's hard for those kind of horses to come true because the mega owners are in Ireland. Richie, I think he'd had a little bit of a quiet spell, so he kind of wanted to announce himself back with one of the most questionable barons I think I've ever seen. But the thing about Vauban is, if you look at him against Pied Piper at Punchestown, he's out jumped at a lot of hurdles. I was watching. As I said, I fancied Field Door. I was very, very happy for most of the race. Like, Vauban's going to struggle to win here. He's ridden out wide at a track. He's turning left. Yep. He's jumping right, and that acceleration. And the strange thing about him is he's a 1.5 mile horse in the flat, but he's still keen and he's still like. He stays really, really well. And the 2 of these horses, they're both roughly 95, 100 on the flat, but they've taken to this game. And this is going to be a hell of a triumph for him. I wonder, does he send Field Door to the Fred Winter or even the Supreme now? Because on this evidence, there isn't a hope that he can reverse that form to me.
Yeah, we were talking about Pied Piper and Field Door, and we were saying last week about Pied Piper maybe going for the Supreme and Field Door going for the Triumph, but things are changing all the time. And after the way Vauban and Pied Piper have won, I'm looking forward to seeing another clash between the 2. Let's have a brief chat about some of the other races. And obviously, yesterday there was Sir Gerhard, Galopin Des Champs. We saw Blue Lord and Sam. I felt for you because I know obviously you tipped Rivière de Tell, and I think with a clean jump she would have probably won, even though some people want to disagree with that. What are your thoughts on some of the other races? A brief recap of everything else, Sam.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't write her off reversing those placings come the Arkle. I think she's a cracking mare, Rivière de Tell. Just a shame that she did pitch on landing at the last. I think doing sort of speed figures and breaking down sectional times, etc. There's just one horse over fences over the weekend that's just carried all before him, and that's Galopin Des Champs. I mean, the figure that he put up to win yesterday, the fact that from 3 out his time was sort of equal to Chacun Pour Soi, even though he'd raced obviously a good significant distance further, had been up in the van throughout. I was a little bit wobbly about his jumping early on. I didn't think that he was perhaps as respectful at some of his fences as he was first time round, but I think we sometimes see that with novices second time. When it comes so easy to them, like it did for him, I just think sometimes the second time there's a bit of complacency set in, and that might have been the case on Sunday, but he soon got back on track, and I just think the lad's a machine. If he was mine, I'd supplement him for the Gold Cup. I think that the figures that he's knocking out at the moment, plenty of practice. I'd have a tilt at the Gold Cup, because if he gets around there, he'll win for me.
He'd be favourite.
Last year's winner, Monkfish. What did you think, Johnny?
He'd be favourite. He'd be favourite for the Gold Cup. But like, I honestly think he would, because that pace that they went. Willie Mullins spoke about afterwards that his heart was in his mouth, and it probably is hard because he knows he's a horse here that could win a Gold Cup, and he was brave at a couple of his fences, but it was a hell of a gallop, and it was a step up massively from just basically winning a kind of an egg and spoon maiden as it was at Leopardstown at Christmas. Brilliant performance, I thought, and I imagine he'll definitely step up and trip at Cheltenham, because that would give him an easier option. But yeah, I think if he went to Gold Cup, he'd be favourite. Don't see it happening, but I think he would be favourite.
Would you run him in the 3 miler, Johnny? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, and looking at him last year as well. By the way, do you know what price he was at the Dublin Racing Festival last year?
The 18 or 20 in that novice hurdle.
100 to 1. 100 to 1. It's just amazing how things can change in a year. I actually backed him at Cheltenham, had a few quid on him, but then he obviously stepped up his form over 3 miles subsequently. And it's the beauty of the national game, I think, is when you see a hurdler who, once you see him jump a fence, he jumps 2 fences on his debut, and you're like, bang, that's why we're in this game, because that's the revelation. That's the, oh my God, like, what have we seen here? And he's amazing to watch.
Yeah, he's got some scope, hasn't he? His fences. I mean, the way he jumped the ditch down the far side, geez, incredible. Took off outside the wings.
Johnny, Sam and I are going to talk about the Supreme Novices Hurdle a little bit later in the show in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted
That's just beautiful, Rishi. That's my only main bet of the whole card, and he wasn't even running at the weekend.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Your thoughts on Sir Gerhard and his performance in relation to the Supreme, and then you could perhaps expand on it for us.
Okay, so I think he'll step up and trip. I don't think he's going to run the Supreme, because I think Willie has two viable alternatives in the race. And I think on pedigree, he's out of Fanon Aldar, who raced for Philip Rothwell. She was a 2-5 horse by authorised. On pedigree, it shouldn't be a problem. Obviously, he stayed well in bumpers. He's a lot of natural speed, this horse, but he's not so flashy that you can kind of hold him back. I'm not really sure he was in love with making the run in yesterday. Some of his hurdling was very much a mixed bag compared to the experience of his hurdling debut. But I love the way this horse goes about his business. He reminds me a bit of O'Connor, who's obviously by Jeremy as well. I hope he lasts longer than him, obviously, but I don't see him running the Supreme.
Which is a blow to me, because I've backed him for the Supreme, hands up, and I felt yesterday's race was perhaps a negative for his chances of appearing in the Supreme. What do you fancy in the Supreme, by the way?
The main negative to his chance, I think, in the Supreme is Dicer Dynamo, because I think Willie does. Look, I'm not 100% sure about him yet. I'm not sure about the form of the last day, and I do think this race is going to set the agenda for the festival in so many respects, because we've two real English hotpots hopefully running. But what about this Kilcruit? He beat Sir Gerhard last year. He should have beaten him at Cheltenham. He's finally getting his act together over hurdles. He's going to get an unbelievably hot gallop to jump off. He's going to get his stablemate making the running for him. What's to say he's not better than John Bond and Constitution Hill? And he's 16-1 in a race he's certain to run in, and he's trained by Willie Mullins.
Johnny, he jumps worse than Sir Gerhard.
He's getting his act together. He jumped slightly better the last day, and he probably needs a toe into his race.
Right, okay. The tongue tie might have helped him a little bit.
Tongue tie helped the last day as well, yeah. And I think, in fairness, as disappointing as he's been, he's definitely not going to step up beyond 2 miles. There's too many question marks about him for that mind. And I think he'll get a lovely toe into the race, and I don't think Sir Gerhard's going to run in this.
Yeah, I've tried to make a case for him as well, Rich, that, you know, because he's such a big price for a class horse. But just went back and watched that Punchestown run. I'll be watching that through my fingers if I backed him.
Well, as for anyone who supported Sir Gerhard, I was surprised that bookmakers cut him. 1 or 2 bookmakers actually cut him for the Supreme yesterday.
Quickly, Rich, on that, just the interest in the data. Very, very similar time in a lot of ways to Honeysuckle. So look at that which way you want. The time from 3 out was virtually identical. The overall time was virtually identical. So yeah, just have a look at that, you know. And if you get a bit of heart from Sir Gerhard, I mean, I'm a little bit with Johnny, really. I think he might step up just to put a little bit less pressure on his jumping at speed. He just doesn't look that proficient for me. Not a natural hurdler by any stretch of the imagination. So I think I'll be going 2.5, I'm afraid, Rish.
Thank you for that. That's brilliant. One horse that I love, and I love what he did on Saturday, now just focusing on Britain briefly, was L'Empresse. He won the Scilly Isles. Now, I know a lot of the Irish experts that I've talked to and discussed the situation with the novice chasers, the 2.5 milers. They're not worried at all about the British horses. But I liked him. Sam, did you like what he did to Pic D'Orhy, etc.?
Yeah, and I think this is a classic race of, you know, you look what's in behind, you know, Pic D'Orhy from a yard that are quiet at the moment, Mr. Coffee, who virtually took the first ditch with him as a souvenir, bulldozed his way through that. He's finished 20 lengths behind. The actual bones of the race and the bare level of form compared to what we've seen over in Leopardstown this weekend is not there. But visually, sometimes you just have to look at a horse like L'Empresse and just the way that he glides over his fences. And he's just majestic, I think. The way he attacked the pond fences, he fiddles, he just looks for every fence and measures them so well. His time, very, very similar to Dolos for the final circuit. Obviously, they only ran 2 miles. He was geared down from the pond fence and was quicker than Dolos, who was all out to win that handicap. Now, I know it's a handicap, and I know, you know, Dolos is well handicapped now and off an inferior rating to the one that L'Empresse is going to be racing off or judged with, but the data's still very nice and stacks up very well for a horse that was virtually in a hat canter and was hand-ridden for about the last mile of that race at Sandown. I thought it was an exemplary performance. You never had a moment's worry, did you?
No, the only worry you had actually, and speaking to Charlie Deutsch after the race, was when that loose horse came up alongside him and just lit him up a little bit. I thought, oh, this might be going against him. But he went away and he still won with plenty in hand. And Charlie Deutsch did confirm after the race that it wasn't ideal, that he did actually have something to go on with, because he didn't want to. He was happy just to let him bowl along. And he probably went a little bit faster than Charlie Deutsch wanted at that point, but he was in a different parish to his rivals. Johnny, I can imagine if dear old Big Mac was still alive, he'd be pointing at the camera now and doing that. Are you, the Irish, worried about L'Imprese? Because that's the question. I mean, I think that he's a really good horse, but it seems that my Irish friends suggest that they're not worried about how good L'Imprese is. Are you?
Well, his performance Saturday was spectacular, and if anything, he's probably going to be slightly better going left-handed. He was a little bit left at his fences. Gorgeous race to watch in terms of that performance. I would dare say there's actually an Irish arrogance that's crept in over the last couple of years. When you're winning 23-5 and you're absolutely obliterating the British in the novice division, you probably think, the Bromhead thinks so much of this horse. As talking to Davy Roach, his assistant, they think the world of this horse, Bob Bollinger, and they probably would laugh at you if you told them that they could be beaten by something in Britain. So as I say, I think it'll be very interesting to see how the Supreme goes. Like, what is the relative strengths of the two divisions at the moment? Because I've serious concerns for British racing going forward in terms of the funding structure, in terms of the owners that are there, and so on and so forth. And I don't think 23-5 is any good at all to racing. I think we need much more competition, and I think he will run very well. Whether he'll beat Bob Bollinger, I'm not sure, but the way he did it on Saturday, and just to be jumping as well as he did, there isn't that much strength maybe in that division as well, I think, with Galopin Des Champs going up in trip. So I think he'll run a very good race at Cheltenham.
Well, when you look at the market for the race, for the Turner Novices Chase at the moment, Bob Bollinger on odds check 11-8, Galopin Des Champs, who's in there, is at 2-1, but L'Imprese is 11-2. And if you think that, like a lot of people, that Galopin Des Champs is going to head to the Brown Advisory, then L'Imprese at 11-2, as the old phrase, a bet to nothing. So I would respect his chances enormously. Johnny, we're coming to the end of this segment, and I really appreciate all your time that you've given us today. But we just had a question for you from one of our subscribers and listeners, Brian Galt, who says on Twitter, he said, well done on a successful weekend of tipping. I hope that he was with you on Conflated. And he wanted to know, in your opinion, what wins the Gold Cup? So is it Galvin, full stop?
Yeah, it's Galvin. Brian's one of the good men of the game as well. And Galvin, but to be honest, not a race we'll be having a bet in at the moment. Because you just... Well, he's quite like, he's 9-2, Rishi. It's like, can he be much shorter than that on the day? Surely not. I mean, you probably get better offers on the day as well. Just wouldn't be for me at the moment. It's a kind of a strange Gold Cup. I could see Manella Indo shortened in price I think he's 7s at the moment. He'll probably be shortened by then as well. Yeah,
I can imagine that he will.
You're defying the stats there with your album photo now. The 10-year-olds have a terrible record in the race, I think.
He does, but it's not as if he's the most exposed 10. It's not like he's had a whole series of hard races season upon season. That I felt that there was still some life in the old dog yet, especially as he's around.
You with the horse.
Sorry?
You with the horse.
Well, both actually. I'd be the same age if I was I'd be around a 10-year-old and also a previous dual Gold Cup winner. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will come back and talk to us on Racing Weekly in the future.
Thanks, guys. All the best.
Cheers, Johnny.
Well, thanks very much to Johnny Ward for joining us on Racing Weekly. But as always, we love having guests from the world of racing. And now we have two for the price of one. We're joined by Lucinda Russell and Peter Scudamore.
Hello.
Lucinda, thanks so much for joining us. Obviously, we're here to talk about the star, Ahoy Senor. First of all, how is he after that impressive win in the Towton? And what did you make of the performance?
I mean, he's really well. He travelled back fine, 8 up. He's a very straightforward horse in that way. I'm just really pleased. I suppose the first feeling was of relief. He ran so well at Newbury, and we really thought we had a sort of flying machine in our hands. And then slightly disappointed at Kempton, although, I mean, how can you be disappointed to be second in a class one and to a very, very good horse? But his jumping to me just was a little bit hit and miss, and he was being sucked to the bottom of the fences. So it was sort of, we kind of had schooled him at home, and we knew that he was in better form and he looked really well. But until they actually get on the track, you don't really know if that's true or not. So it was just fantastic to to see him jump like he did. I think Derek was very cool with him. He said to me afterwards that he always kind of thought that he was going to win the race, so he didn't put him under any pressure to start with, and just enjoyed the ride, which I think was pretty cool for a jockey to see.
I love his engine. It looks magnificent. He just looks like he's got so much more to give. But what work did you do with him between Kempton and Wetherby in terms of the jumping?
Yeah, so well, there were a couple of things really. So when he was in the paddock at Kempton, I just felt he'd lost a little bit of muscle over his quarters. So we kind of did a bit of extra work with him to build that up. We've got a water treadmill, as you probably know, and that really builds them up behind. So that was good. So we did that, had that on an incline. And then we did a bit of, we schooled him over the big tires, schooled him over the easy fix fences that we've got. And we also gave him 3 sessions actually in the school, just going over poles, which I sort of learned when I was doing my eventing. And we do what's called a bounce to a stride. So they do 2 fences close together and then a stride to another fence. And my aim was really, what I found that he was doing was he was going in deep to the fences, not actually using his shoulders. So we built a sort of V-poles on the last fence to just try and make the stride really short, to just try and get him to use himself, so that he had to go and lower his head and pick his shoulders up. And I don't know if that worked or not, but he certainly seemed to jump a lot better. And I think the first fence, when he went to it, he kind of tried to run to the bottom, but then he backed off and jumped it well. So I'm pleased with what we've done at home. It's not a thing that I do with every horse, and it's not a thing that I keep on doing with him. It's just really to refresh their memory and to get them using themselves again. But, you know, this horse has got an immense talent. He really knows how to jump. It's just when the things aren't going quite so right for him, just helping him to learn how to get his legs out of the way.
And would you say, Luce, that he's quite a quick learner?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's a remarkable horse. He's like all these, you know, you've met sort of talented people and talented horses. They're all the same. They're very quick to pick up on things. He's a very natural athlete. I mean, he's a big horse, but he's very light on his feet for all of that he is quite big. And yeah, no, he's very smart. And I suppose horses learn because it makes it easier for them. If they jump well, then it's an easy thing. And that's the whole, you know, the emphasis when you asked about what he's like after the race. He's remarkably good, but then he hasn't had a really hard race. He wasn't wasn't too challenged in the finish. At Kempton, he came back quite tired, and I suppose the travelling wasn't great for him either. But coming back from Wetherby, you know, he's bright, he's fresh. I think he knows that he's done well, and it's just great to have him with that confidence and to be feeling on top of the world again.
Because 1 or 2 people will say, well, he beat a small field at Wetherby, but you know, Saint-Parlay was going into the race on the crest of a wave, and your lad just seemed to take him out of his comfort zone. You know, he's travelled and jumped beautifully in those previous 3 races, but it was just like, this is a different level for him on Saturday. And, you know, you put him under immense pressure, as you did the other 2 runners as well. You must be sort of delighted with the sort of scope that Ahoy Senor shows at his fences, really. I just don't think I've seen a novice give ditches so much light, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very, physically he's a very imposing horse, and I think he manages to use that in his jumping. But look, I'll leave the form to you guys. You're much better at it. Scoot's better at it. Paul McIver's better at it. But my thing is just to produce the horse in the best condition. And I sort of feel from that, but we've talked to the owners, and I'm sure it's a question you're going to ask in a minute. But what we do now, and really my aim is the Gold Cup next year. So it's how we get him there in the best condition and teaching him the best that we can do. I think with these great horses, you know, you've got to let them tell you a little bit and let them just help them, just hold their hand and help them get to the top. So that's probably the same with all horses, but you just have to give him the time that he needs and let him get the experience that he needs.
What would be the
sorry, Rishi, after you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, listen, what would be the conversation you're going to have with the owners about what next? And obviously the Gold Cup next year is fantastic, but we're all desperate to know where he's going to go at the festival in five weeks' time. So how would you go about making that decision?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky with these owners, Karen and Bruce Weimer. They've been fantastic. They haven't had racehorses that long, only for a couple of years, and they're absolutely brilliant. They're very much a team player, and they listen to us, and obviously they've got their ideas. Bruce in particular is very smart about things, has picked it up very quickly. So I don't know. I suppose the thing is just to make the decision together. It's not something that I've decided myself, so I can't sort of try and swing it to make them agree with me. It's one of those things that we're just going to have to see how he comes over the next week. and decide what we do with him.
Cool. You know, he's the type of horse that you feel as though he'd be, for a big horse, he'll still be able to organise himself okay around Cheltenham.
Yes, I think that's what we were doing in the school with him a couple of last week was exactly that, to help him learn how to organise himself. You're right, he is a big horse. It's very easy from these fences at Newbury and Wetherby. They really suit him. Up and down at Cheltenham, it's going to be a bit of a different thing. I mean, without doubt, going back round Aintree, maybe doing the novice chase there, that would be a fantastic track for him. Same sort of thing, you can sort of attack the fences, but we'll see. I mean, you're right, he's got immense talent. I'm just very proud to have him, and it's just getting him in the right condition for the biggest race.
Has Scud told you, Lucinda, of any horses that he rode that might be comparable in terms of the way, obviously in terms of talent, don't really want to compare, different generations, but he reminds me of Carville's Hill, the way he goes through the races, that sort of relentless, remorseless galloping, and getting horses, as Sam said, getting horses out of their comfort zone is a skill few horses have the capability of doing. Carville's Hill did that. Obviously, Scud rode him. I just wondered, watching him race, whether Scud would have ever mentioned that name to you, talking about comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, he has mentioned Carville's Hill. He's actually just walked out, so I can't ask him, but you're right. And he is that sort of horse that is just relentless and just can keep on galloping, keep on jumping. So, I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask Scud yourself. I can't remember very much about Carville's Hill.
His timing was usually better than that, Scud.
Carville's Hill.
He's not like him at all.
He's not like him at all, he says, shaking his head. He's in a bit of a grumpy mood today. I don't know why. What else would you say?
We were thinking, sorry, I'm very, very scruffy. I don't know if you're on, Sam. I was thinking, you think about his jumping to go to Cheltenham and stuff, I'm on a road when Freestone Alliances as it was then, and he probably jumps better than two of them, He didn't jump as well as Young Hustler, but I mean, Young Hustler was an exceptional. Well,
that's better.
Yeah, and Young Hustler was an exceptional jumper. So, but Rolling Ball didn't jump as well as him, and the Mini Homer went to won a Grand National. He wasn't. He made mistakes. So it's lots of things to think of. I just don't. It's a nice problem to have. On top of the problem to have, it looks a very hot division, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was wondering what you made of some of the potential horses that might race in that division. I mean, obviously you'd have seen Galopin Des Champs winning on the weekend in the Dublin Racing Festival, and people waxing lyrical about the manner of his performances as well.
Yeah, and speaking to the connections of 3 under 5, is it?
Yeah,
they were very sensible. Venetia's horse winning so well at Sandown, that makes the 2.5 mile novice chase look a very hot race. So I can't see many of the 3 miles dropping down to the 2.5 to avoid the others. So I think that could make the 3 mile novice chase very good. Brave Man's Game is obviously an exceptional talent. So it's great. It's great for racing. It looks as a top class renewal, and so we'll see.
Would it be in your mind? And you'll probably say this is a load of rubbish, but would it be in your mind to give Cheltenham a swerve and just go to Aintree with him?
It's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, we've got 3 options just now. We've got giving it a swerve and going to Aintree. We've got the Brown Advisory. We've got the Gold Cup. So there are 3 races. He'll definitely run in one of them.
Exciting though, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have those options. You're not looking at a 0 to 120 at Catterick, are you? You.
I am now. I'm doing the form book now. I'm looking at lots of those.
Well, on that, is there anything running this week that we ought to look out for?
No, but I don't. Well, what have we got? We've got Bango.
We were excited with the horse that won on Mossaborough, also by the same Douglas Torkins by Dylan Thomas, and he wouldn't race over hurdles. He just kicked his hurdles out of the ground, wouldn't race. And so I've got to try and find a race for him before the handicapper gets hold of him. You could go to Air. So this, that's
looking on a bit. I think this week we've got 3 horses entered in the one race at Bangor. So whichever one goes to Bangor has probably got the best chance of all of our horses. But yeah, so that's a 3.5 handicap chase at Bangor on Thursday.
Duly noted. Just before you go, we every week that we have our guests on, we always ask them the same 3 questions. Now, do you both want to answer the question?
Oh, she answers them for me anyway. I'll leave you to it.
I knew Skew would leave at that point. Skew, thank you. So Lucinda, here we go. Your 3 questions are, what was the best performance of last weekend?
Of my horses? Actually, I only watch my horses anyway. So Skew's chipping in with Honeysuckle. Undoubtedly, she's a fantastic mare. Kenny Alexander's got a great mare, and well done to him for keeping on racing her and not just starting to breed with her. I think that's fantastic. I was pretty impressed with the Ahoy Senor, I have to say.
A lot of people were. What will be the best performance of the weekend ahead?
Not sure, because I haven't even looked at the entries, and we haven't got many entries. Sorry.
Okay, we'll let you pass on that. But the final question we won't let you pass on is, if you could change anything in racing, and obviously we mean absolutely anything, what would it be?
To make it a criminal offence for race courses to race over jumps on good to firm ground. Good, eh?
Very fine.
I've got another one as well.
Go on.
It's very nice that they're painting all the ground lines white, and that's very noble. But if they should get more of those rubber hurdles, because they're absolutely fantastic, and the number of injuries sustained by horses with the rubber hurdles compared to the normal old-fashioned hurdles is much, much less. And that's scientifically proven, which I like. So yeah, rubber hurdles.
Lucinda, thank you. A couple of welfare suggestions. The first that we've had on Racing Weekly. Thank you so much to both yourself and Skew for the cameo appearance. Well done with Ahoy Senor on the weekend. Whatever race he turns up in, whether it's at the Cheltenham Festival or indeed at Aintree, we wish you, the team, the very, very best of luck. He's got a lot of fans. That fan base is growing, and hopefully it's onwards and upwards with the big horse. Thank you, Lucinda.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, here on Racing Weekly, we like to talk about some of the big stories in the sport. So with that in mind, let's discuss the stories of the week. Now, we know that this week's show has an incredibly strong Irish theme, and that's going to continue in this upcoming segment. Sam, we've just seen a couple of great days of top quality racing at Leopardstown. Clearly, the Irish have a very strong hand, as emphasised by the magnificent performances that we've already discussed in the show. So realistically, how many races do you think Britain will win?
Well, we saw Boreham Wood win over the weekend, didn't we, Rish? And British racing feels a bit like Boreham Wood versus Bournemouth at the moment. If we could reach the 5th round of the FA Cup and perhaps have more than 5 winners, I think that would be an exceptional start, to be honest, to the week. I think the first race may well set the tone, mightn't it, with the Supreme Novices Hurdle? 2 strong candidates in that, and perhaps 1 or 2 others just in the backwash. Fingers crossed we can get a bit of a lead there. We've got Edwardstown in the Arkle, so we need to try and build up a bit of momentum early on, hopefully. But it's looking a bit bleak, Rish. I've got to be honest. I mean, I don't know what you think, but the Irish just seem to have like 4, 5, 6, 7 candidates for every big race at the moment, and I just can't see how we can't stop the green and gold from overtaking us.
I think that's the main issue, is the fact that there's strength in depth, don't you think? That through all the races where they have the favourites or the horses at the top of the market, there are horses behind them who are ready to step forward should the favourites or the short price favourites come up short. So that's where the issue is for me. And there are some really strong individual, I think, British contenders, whether that is Edwardstown or I like L'Empresse. Shishkin obviously is the standout, but whether we have enough to get us to double figures, I'm not so certain. You?
Well, 23-5 last year, Rish. It wasn't an England batting card. It was the score, and now, unfortunately, that doesn't seem as though it's going to be improved upon this year. But let's hope that we might strike and get a few more on the board. But as you say, the strength in depth is ridiculous. Fernie Hollow drops out and is replaced by Blue Lord. I know Horton Calors drops, but Saint Sam, there's the second, third, fourth strings are all there. And as Johnny touched on, Galopin Des Champs was 100-1 for a novice hurdle at this meeting 12 months ago. And look at his progress since. So who's to say, if you go digging about in the novice hurdles and down in the handicaps and whatever from the last 2 days, whether you're not going to discover some more gems. So there could be even more. It could be even bleaker come Cheltenham week.
Yeah, well, on a similar theme, with Cheltenham in mind, we saw all four odds-on favourites win yesterday at Leopardstown. The 4 races were won by a combined 33.5 lengths, and the starting prices you could have backed the fourfold at 130. Is this something to be worried about? The fact that we're going to expect another whole host of shorties at the festival?
I think it's the same every year, though, isn't it, Rishi? I mean, we get, short price horses, and they in some respects make the races, really, because people are either with or against them. And there was obviously a lot made of the Acker, and a lot of people doing the Acker and winning a few bob, and obviously needing the bumper horse of Mullins's to cop for the full lot. I think it makes it. I think it gets punters revved up if there's short ones they're looking to take on. I think there's a raft of markets that you should be able to have a look at as well. The without the favourite markets always been very popular in Ireland. Whenever you went onto an Irish racecourse, there'd be bookmakers betting without the first and second favourite, without the favourite. It's something that we're sort of latching onto a little bit slower, I think, this side of the Irish Sea. But I do think it's a good market to start digging around in sometimes. If you can see how the race is going to be run, and you can see, is there going to be a front runner going to be taking on the hot favourite? Those perhaps aren't the ones you want. You want the one that's perhaps a little bit more conservatively ridden, that can pick up some pieces late on. I think if you're a little bit more imaginative and creative with the markets, you can still get, some good value and some really interesting bets, and try and see races from a different angle. As a tipster, it's difficult, isn't it? You put the favourites up because you think they're the best horses. They win, you get no thanks for it. They get beat, you get called useless. You can't have 2 bets in a race. You can't put up one as the winner of the race and then perhaps an each way alternative, even if we do previews and things like that where we try and make that the case. We all want sort of 5-2 the field races and genuine betting heats where you can have a nice crack each way. But sometimes we're going to get in these graded races, some 7-runner races. The Arkle has been that way in the past, a number of times. And you just have to try and look at these markets as a punter, I think almost a week before, try and evaluate what the weather forecast is. I don't know about you, and try and see which horses you think are going to drop away, which horses are going to be there. And if you can get yourself 3 places and a nice tidy each way bet, you might get your account closed, but at least you've got a chance of having a nice win at Cheltenham week. Yeah,
and that's part of the conversation that we had earlier on. I was thinking about, for example, L'Empresse at the moment, 11-2 on odds check. I'm thinking the likelihood is Galopin Des Champs is going to go and run in the Brown Advisory, leaving the Turners between, in my opinion, L'Empresse and Bob Ollinger. And I'd prefer to take a chance with a horse who's clearly still unexposed and open to a lot more. I know Bob Ollinger is a seriously good horse. So I don't need anyone to tell me that. But you got an each way shot at a horse at 11-2 who at the moment looks potentially very, very good. And there are different ways of playing the market, I guess, is the upshot of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and you get a proficient jumper, touch wood, and I think he's sort of 9-2 if you want to take a point shorter, non-runner, no bet. So you've got a little bit of insurance there. Yes, he might not get a lot shorter, but they'll be chipping away at that. When the race, starts to break down a little bit as we get closer to the day, there might be a chance there's only 7 in that. Bob Ollinger, who ran all over Brave Man's Game 12 months ago, connections might be thinking, well, it's a waste of time us going for that race. So that might become a 7-runner race. If you're on L'Empresse, as you say, 11-2 or 9-2 in the insurance markets each way, 3 places, you've got really proficient jumpers. We don't know how good he could be, do we? The data's telling us he's pretty good. His manner of his performances are pretty good. Great deal of authority in the way that he's winning. He's winning by big margins every time he goes to the track. Just because he's not Irish or Irish trained, we're trying to put a fork in him, really. I think we should, perhaps embrace horses like him, who's been quite, aggressively campaigned and looks to have been well campaigned by a brilliant trainer. So what's not to like about his chance?
Well, one thing we know about L'Empresse is that his stable, Venetia Williams, has been in pretty good form through the season. People often used to talk about, she had a really good spell in December into January and it's really heavy, tough going, but she's having a very good season. A couple of high-profile stables just out of form at the moment. Obviously, we've talked about Henry de Bromhead and the Paul Nicholls team. They've had their jabs and the horses haven't quite come back to form as a whole yet. And Alex Keating on Twitter says, how much of a concern is stable form going into the festival? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, really interesting question, because I think a few people really don't understand. I don't know if they want to take on board stable form being a thing. I think Paul Nicholls might be this week, and I think I'd argue with anybody who feels that their yard's in great nick, because it just isn't at the moment. I don't recognise the run that the Nicholls team have had from anything I've virtually seen before. I was reminded there was a spell, I think about 6 years ago, around a December time, where they went a few weeks without a winner, or just trained one winner in 2 or 3 weeks. So they were pretty barren. But it is quite, they are quite, Jesse Harrington, 2 from 53 or 55 from the 1st of November. Gavin Cromwell, another very quiet yard. Henry de Bromhead, obviously quite a high-profile yard that are going at a very small percentage at the moment, which is unusual. And these have been a number of weeks and months. They've not just been the last week or the last fortnight. These have been going on a while. I mean, Jesse's had a couple of winners through January, which have been a bit of a bonus for them. But they are things that you have to take into account. There are also things you have to take into account if you bet an ante-post as well, because Bob Ollinger's a short price horse. I know Henry de Bromhead's having winners, but they've pretty much been 5 on chances in the last week or two. So it is a bit of a concern. And that's why I think sometimes there is an eagerness to have an ante-post bet. And I get that, you might get yourself some 10 to 1, about a 5 to 2 chance on the day, but you don't actually know the full picture when you're striking the bet. You have to just weigh up really whether it's a decent trade-off, taking the bigger price, but with the concerns that you might have a horse from a yard that's completely out of nick, or the ground might not be right. So it's just evaluating the risk, I think.
It's a minefield. There are no rights and wrongs as things stand at the moment. We only find out when the race is over. Well, with the festival just 5 weeks away, we're going to try and give you a few pointers, send you in the right direction of some ante-post bets. Each week, we focus on one race at the festival. This week, we will focus on the race that gets things underway with the famous Cheltenham Roar, the Supreme Novices Hurdle. Sam, this is looking like one of the best races of the meeting. In fact, one of the best races of the season. Britain versus Ireland. What are your thoughts on the shape of the Supreme Novices Hurdle?
Well, it is boiling up to be a magnificent race, isn't it? We talked, I think, in earlier podcasts about the Fab Four. Obviously, 2 from the Henderson camp, 2 from the Mullins camp, and they're doing nothing really to put you off them. I mean, people will all have their particular favourites. We haven't seen Constitution Hill for a little bit, but John Bond's progress has been fairly serene. Dysite Dynamo, we've seen 2 examples of his exhilarating run style. And of course, Sir Gerhard, strengthened his claims for Cheltenham glory with a very proficient win at the Dublin Racing Festival over the weekend, even if his jumping was just a little sluggish in places and a little clumsy on occasion. So, it looks like a magnificent four, doesn't it, Rish? I know which camp you're in. I think you might know which camp I'm in.
You're in?
Dysite Dynamo, the explosive Dysite Dynamo. I think he could be a little bit special.
We've gone for one each for the Willie Mullins team. I like Sir Gerhard. I wasn't entirely blown away by what he did. As you use the right word, proficient is what you can use to describe his performance at the Dublin Racing Festival. I do believe that he's a better horse than that, and I think back at Cheltenham with a proper gallop, I'd like to see him get a lead. I think that will help. But I'm slightly concerned that after that performance at the Dublin Racing Festival, it's possible that the Ballymore might now be coming into focus. Just listening to Willie Mullins talking about it after the race and saying that the horse could do both. And we know from what Johnny was saying earlier on, pedigree-wise, it suggests that he'd be absolutely fine over further. But I thought he's got a lot of speed. So I'm hoping that it stays the way it is at the moment, and the 4 of them line up. If they do, what a race. Kilcrut, Johnny obviously mentioned that you're happy to unless his jumping improves enormously, happy to keep him on the back burner for the moment for that race.
Yeah, I don't want to damn the selection because it's 16 to 1. It's not as if Johnny's put up a 5 to 2 chance and we're looking for find a big hole in the horse. He's improving. He showed us no more at Punchestown that he can gallop, I think, and we knew that about him anyway. He was a talented horse as a bumper horse. So I think there's a fair bit of, I think he needs polishing the hurdling technique. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, got a couple of questions from our followers on Twitter. This one's from Owen Johnson. He says, what's the one horse you'd be opposing, or is there anything overrated after what we saw at the Dublin Racing Festival? Let you have first crack at this, Sam.
Go on. Have you got anything, Rich? I can't think of anything. All of those shorties that won on Sunday, Galopin Des Champs, Chacun Pour Soi, Honeysuckle, Sir Gerhard, Facile Vega. I don't think any of them have been overrated. I think they're just all world class.
I think there are a couple of horses that maybe, so Phil Dore, having got beaten as comfortably by Vauban, and what we saw from Pied Piper, I'd say the likelihood is that Phil Dore's not going to win the Triumph Hurdle for the Elliott stable, but I think that's pretty obvious now. It's reflected in his price. He's around 8-1 on odds checker. The only one I'd put in, and I say this with a heavy heart because I love the horse and I'm prepared to forgive him because things haven't clearly been easy for him, is Chacun Pour Soi. I know that he was very impressive. I know he looked good the way he finished his race, but he has now disappointed twice on his travels to Britain. And I think it's a better race, the Queen Mother Champion Chase this year than it was 12 months ago. So I would be prepared to take him on as a win proposition. But, you know, I say that with a heavy heart because he is a top performer.
All right. Well, I'll say Blue Lord then. I'm not convinced by him yet. All
right. Okay. I'll let you have that, especially as your horse should have beaten him, I think, at Leopardstown, Rivière de Tel. And one more question from Adam O'Connor on Twitter. He says, not much British representation at the Dublin Racing Festival. Obviously, Paul Nicholls had a couple of horses there. As with most years, does that show how strong the Irish horses currently are? And are we staring at another Irish Cheltenham in a few weeks? We've obviously discussed this a little bit. Would you have a score prediction for the festival?
I don't know about that, Rich, but 24-4. I can't blame British trainers for not wanting to go over there and having their backsides handed to them. I mean, they could stay at home and have that in a month's time or 6 weeks' time, can't they? So what's the point in going to Ireland, taking on the creme de la creme and coming back with your tails between your legs? To be fair to Paul Nicholls, he identified two races for Frodon and for Grenadine, went and had a go. Now, it just happened to coincide with the fact that the yards just hit a blip or hit a brick wall for whatever reason, which is a real shame because fair play to him. You know, his trips to Ireland, I think his last 3 winners had won prior to Frodon running in the Gold Cup. So, you know, you can't say that he's not an aggressive campaigner of horses, and he's been keen to go and embrace that challenge, and which is more than, you know, perhaps 1 or 2 trainers in this country have been. On one, Greychecks has had a bit of success over there, but you know, Nicky Henderson wouldn't take many horses out there, unfortunately, and you know, the likes of Fergal O'Brien, Dan Skelton, you know, they're not sighted, are they? They haven't got the horses that they want to run there. So yeah, it's disappointing. It would be nice to have a bit of a stronger British challenge, but it just reflects where we are at the moment in the cycle of who has the best horses.
It is a cycle, or at least we hope it's a cycle. So that's a little look back, and thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming in the next few weeks. We'll answer as many as we can. But now on Racing Weekly, it's time to look ahead to this week's racing, in particular this weekend, some quality racing potentially at Newbury. Sam, what are the horses and the races that are exciting you most of all?
Well, I love the Betfair Hurdle. I always think that's a great race to get your teeth into. I napped in the handicap hurdle at Sandown over the weekend. Didn't quite work out. Don Levant ran well, but I think you've got a good chance. You know, you've got the enhanced place offers that you can sometimes take advantage of, and the Betfair Hurdle lends itself to that perfectly. I think the 16 entered now at the 5-day stage. Looks a really competitive race, as you'd imagine, and just a great race to get your teeth into.
Go on, point us in the direction of a couple that you like, maybe.
Well, I like to. I think looking for a lightly raced horse in this race has been a good way to go in the past. I think Broomfield Berg, the bigger prices about him have sort of ebbed away a little bit, but I do think he's a major player. I think he's going to be a better horse in a bigger field with a stronger gallop, help him settle a little bit. They took the hood off last time, which conversely worked because he settled better without it. He beat Black Poppy quite comfortably. He landed a gamble at Hereford a while back. So that form's had a small enhancement. I think he's a major player. I just think that the way that the race sets up will be absolutely perfect for him. So I think I'll have him on side. And probably last year's winner as well, Soaring Glory, who's been running around in small field races the last twice. He ran in the Christmas Hurdle behind Epperton. He ran in a 4-runner Jerry Fielden at Newbury. I don't think that suited him at all. He never got out of last place that day. He's another one that likes the hurly-burly, the stronger gallop of these competitive handicaps. We saw last year, he sauntered through the race. I think he's been given a little bit of respite by the handicapper. I think probably his whole season's been geared about having a repeat go at this race. So I think he's another very interesting one. I don't know whether he'll still be double figures or not when the new market gets introduced, but I think he's the kind of horse that, with such a decent Newbury record and the way that he moves through a race off a strong gallop, he'd be another one that takes my eye. Were there any other races on the card that you like the look of?
Well, I'm interested. There's Brave Man's Game has got a couple of entries on the weekend. Entered in the Denman Chase, but he's also entered in the Novices Limited Handicap Chase, which starts the card on Saturday. But there's news that emerged just recently. Paul Nicholls is saying that he's not going to have any runners in the first part of the week while he and his team continue to search for a reason behind the stable's sudden loss of form. Now, I'm assuming that won't prevent his runners taking part on the weekend, but it doesn't bode well for those horses that are due to run. And obviously, if they are due to run with a view to running at the Cheltenham Festival and getting their prep runs in, then it's looking a little bit uncertain. So that's just something significant, I think, to bear in mind. What do you make?
I mean, for me, it might be a blessing, to be honest, if they don't run. I know we like to encourage competition, etc. And maybe Paul Nicholls feels that Brave Man's Game does need the run, but I'm sure he could perhaps take him away to Wincanton for a little bit of a spin or whatever. I just, there was a feeling that he was a little bit over the top at this meeting last year when Bob Ollinger ran over the back of him, and I just wonder whether he might be a little bit better fresh and going to the well once too often this year and running at Newbury this week and then 5 weeks to Cheltenham. Paul Nicholls has won the champion trainers title multiple times. I've yet to record my first victory, so I should just probably keep my mouth shut. But I think, mate, things happen for a reason, and if the horses were to have a few days break and not go to the races and just be kept fresh and well and get to Cheltenham with one less run under the belts, then I don't think that horse needs experience, does he? He's a pretty good leper, Rish.
As good as a novice that you'll see jump a fence. Denman Chase, then potentially Clandazobo might still run because obviously he won't go to Cheltenham Festival. And Royal Pagai's entered, Imperial Aura. I mean, it's not a race that I'd particularly want to have a bet in, if I'm entirely honest. And also worth mentioning, Sam, I think Edwardstone in the Kingmaker, about to display his Arkle wares. I'd expect him to cruise round there. He was unlucky when he came down there earlier in the season. It wasn't his fault, and I think that he looks a rock solid contender for the Arkle. But I
want to see a little bit more from him, if I'm honest. I was a bit underwhelmed with him last time over Christmas at Kempton. Thought he got a bit low at 1 or 2, and I don't know whether he's just got a little complacent. But I think if he's going to take on the crack Irish novices, I think he just needs to polish that up a little bit, his technique.
I thought maybe last time at Kempton it might have just been a little bit of a flatter run. Than
he still won 10 lengths, didn't he, Rich?
Yeah. He won the run last year. Really good. And what followed at Kempton wasn't quite so good, but it obviously came relatively short space of time. His runs in the early part of the season. As the 5-time tips of the year, Sam, it's that time of the week where everyone tunes in. Last week came very close. Riviere de Tel, what have you got for us this week?
I'm not sure it is the bit that everyone tunes in for, Rich, to be honest, but bless you for saying it. Can I have a split stakes go at the Betfair Hurdle, please? Broomfield Berg and Soaring Glory.
So this week's Turner's tip, Broomfield Berg and Soaring Glory. I have to say that I'm going to endorse the Broomfield Berg selection, the lively citizen black poppy form that he brings into the race, plus the fact I'm sure he's better than a 130 or mid 130s rated hurdler. He looks really good. I'm rowing that boat with you, Sam. Just a quick question for you, by the way, from Alex on Twitter. Based on what we saw this weekend, what's your one bet for the festival right now?
Good question.
Vauban.
Vauban. If I could be assured that Galopin Des Champs was going to go in the 3-miler, him as well.
Okay, Vauban, Galopin Des Champs in the 3-miler. Sam Turner, thank you very much. Thank you as well to Johnny Ward, to Lucinda Russell, and a cameo appearance from Peter Scudamore on this week's edition of Racing Weekly. Please tune in next week when we'll be joined by another guest from the world of racing. And we'll be looking forward to the Betfair Chase at Ascot and the Grand National Trial at Haydock. One last reminder, though, for Odds Checkers Cheltenham Super Service. The hard yards been put in for you on the lead up to the festival. That means you'll get all the news that matters, exclusive insight from experts, daily tips, the latest bookie offers, all to your inbox. Just sign up with the link in the YouTube description below or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Don't forget, we're here every Monday on the lead up to Cheltenham. If you like what you've heard or watched, then please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or in the comment section on YouTube. It will certainly mean a lot to us. Thanks very much to everyone who's tuned in so far, and thank you for joining us today, this edition, and we'll see you again next week.